Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm so excited about this video. Let's talk about palettes that you can use when your brain is fried and you don't have any creative juices. This video hit me yesterday when I was using the perfect palette for that. I'm going to mention that first as we go through these, but I actually have a stack of palettes. I went through my collection and pulled out the ones that I know that I can use when I want to wear eyeshadow, but I don't want to think about it. If any of the eyeshadow palettes I pulled out and looked at it and I thought, oh, I wish I had this particular shade in it, I put it back. Or if I looked at it and I had to think for a second of what would I do, I put that one back as well. For me, this video is all about palettes that I guess could be put in the basic category, but they go beyond basic. These are the ones that have your back. The palettes that will do the most when you don't know what to do. I also only tried to include palettes that are still available, so that cut out a lot of my collection as well. I also really tried to pick palettes that could be used in a professional setting. So a lot of times when we don't have creative juices, we're doing our makeup, it's because it's early in the morning, we're getting ready for work. Maybe you have a job where you can't necessarily wear bright fun colors, maybe you can't necessarily wear sparkles. So I tried to pick palettes that had a really solid matte selection. And of course, a formula that you're not gonna spend forever blending, because let's face it, we're trying to hurry, right? All of these qualities are palettes that I tend to keep in my collection. So I have a stack of 15 palettes that I can share with you. If you have more that you'd like to add to this list that meet all these criteria, please leave it down in the description box. It doesn't necessarily have to be a neutral palette. It just has to be a palette you don't have to think about how the colors go together. So the palette that started it all, I used this one yesterday, and I know some of you might roll your eyes when you see this one because it's been out for such a long time and many people view it as the most boring palette, but this is the Tartelette L Bloom palette. So yesterday I was wearing a pretty intense blush look and kind of more intense lips as well. I still wanted to wear eyeshadow, but I knew I had to keep it toned down. Otherwise it was going to be too much. I didn't want any sparkle. And this created the most beautiful matte look in no time. I used the cream to brighten the inside of my eyelid, Smarty Pants through my crease, and I deepened it with Rebel down here. This palette actually has a lot of depth, so it's gonna work for a lot more skin tones than some of the other palettes that I have. I tend not to buy palettes that have a lot of depth just because I don't use those shadows all the time. I pretty much never use these unless I'm using them for liner. I also really like the way that this is laid out. It's like a no-brainer. You've got cool tones, kind of medium-ish, neutral-ish tones. And this row down here that in my mind, I call the burgundy row, even though it's not full-on burgundy, but it's the type of pinky burgundy that still works on eye colors without making you look sick. Like, I think there's a reason why this one has been out for such a long time. I don't ever see Tarte, honestly, getting rid of it. It's like the perfect professional wear to work palette. And I was very, very happy with how my look turned out yesterday. So that had to be the first one that I mentioned. Okay, now let's talk about a bunch of small palettes. Small palettes are probably the #1 type of palette that fits into this category, just because you don't have a lot of choices then, right? When you don't have any creative juices, you want the choices made for you. So small palettes are often the way to go. And I have a whole bunch to mention. So this first one is from Kaleidos. This is the Cold Brew Quad. So when I first got this, I actually thought it was pretty cool toned. This extremely sparkly shade here is pretty silvery and cool toned, but these are actually more neutral and they have the perfect depth to them with a light medium. And then this one over here, I know it doesn't look that deep, but I actually rarely use it when I use this palette. I tended to stick with these two because this one actually goes a lot darker than I need it to. So if you like a lot of depth, you'll like this. And Kaleidos in general has an excellent, like really, really good eyeshadow formula, but there's something about the mattes in these quads, or at least in this one that I have tried, it's best out of all the Kaleidos palettes I have, and I have several Kaleidos palettes. They're just super creamy. Like there's just extra creaminess to them that is just luscious and delightful. If you like a neutral brown eye trio, this is perfection. And if you'd feel like you could add a little bit of sparkle, I mean, it's gorgeous. It is lovely. I'm gonna try not to swatch things because I mean, I have a lot of palettes to go through. Just know that is a very intense, sparkly shade. Okay, so this palette from Viseart actually is not neutral. This is the Petite Pro Tua, but it definitely hit the category for me just because this is definitely a no-brainer palette for me. We have mattes on the top, shimmers on the bottom. This cream shade is super handy if you prefer matte looks. A perfect little crease shade here, and then 2 different colors of a deepening shade. These 3 shades right here, easy peasy eye look. And then if you have some options, if you want to add some sparkle. But the second I opened this, I was like, oh, absolutely, this fits my criteria. Viseart has a glorious matte formula. What makes it so nice? It's more buildable than other formulas, but it's still very pigmented. Like, it hits this sweet spot where you're not going to be overwhelmed with pigment, but it will definitely get the work done in as simple and as quick a way as possible because they blend so easily. I definitely would like more Viseart palettes. I think that this is a delightful little palette, and look how cute it is. It's so small. Okay, from a colorful palette to something that's very, very neutral. This one from Charlotte Tilbury. I admit I was unsure about putting this in the video because I am a little annoyed at how kind of light it is for as expensive as this is. I was expecting it to be nice and heavy. But if we're gonna talk about the eyeshadow formula, I actually really like the formula in this palette. So this is the Super Nudes Easy Eye palette. And obviously, looking at that color story, very, very easy to create looks with. And the eyeshadows in here, they're all kind of somewhere between a satin and a matte. They're like a sheeny matte, not a true sequin shadow where it's like sparkles in a matte, a sheeny matte. It just makes it really, really easy to blend and also very flattering on the eye. And of course, these shades all go together. And so again, no brainer, easy one to work with. Continuing on with the little palettes. So this one from M Cosmetics was one of the first ones that came to mind for me when I was like, which palettes in my collection are the easiest to use in terms of not having to think? So this is the Divine Skies Rodin palette. So for me, this is extremely user-friendly. So you choose either a neutral or a warm toned crease shade. Then you have your deepening shade. Then you have your inner corner or brightening eyelid shade. You have a sparkly topper shade if you so choose, and you have a rich brown if you so choose. I know I've mentioned this palette before as just having extraordinarily nice mattes, and I still stand by that. Every single time I use this palette, I'm kind of floored at the mattes. They're very silky, which I admit, enjoying the matte so much kind of took the sting out of how much this palette cost. I did buy it on sale. These little palettes from M Cosmetics are not cheap, but it does feel like the quality is there. Okay, I have to mention this one from Urban Decay. I have not heard anyone mention this palette in a really long time, and I'm actually hoping it's still available. I think it is. This is the Mini Naked 3. So the Naked 3 from Urban Decay, famous for being a cool toned pinky palette, and this is the mini version. And this is one of those palettes, again, holy smokes, I do not have to think. This immediately goes in my crease. I choose one of these two as a lid shade. I can use either of these as a deepening shade, and then this is my inner corner shade. Easy peasy, and I'm actually always very happy with how this ends up looking. Sometimes shades like this can be a little bit iffy, sometimes they can be a little bit bruisey even, but there's something about the tones of these that are actually very flattering. And I don't reach for this palette nearly enough. Every time I use it, I'm like, wow, I love this even more than I thought I did. And Urban Decay does go on sale on their website as well. Like, you might not find this on sale as often at Sephora or at Ulta, but if you watch Urban Decay's website, you might be able to get a good deal on this one. This next one, you know, if you've been watching my channel, had to be in this video. So the Going Coconuts palette from Colourpop. Mine's getting pretty beat up at this point, but this is another one I can approach when I have zero creativity for the day and I know I'm gonna get a very pretty look. We've got some beautiful mattes for just a plain matte look if I so desire. This shade down here gives me a lot of depth. I rarely need to use it, or if I do use it, I use just a tiny bit. And it's nice because one is more cool toned, one is more neutral, and then we've got a warm toned one. And you don't always find that in a palette, actually. A lot of times they will choose if it's a warm tone palette or a cool tone palette. And this has a few options, so even though it's only a 9 pan, I can get a lot of versatility out of it. This center shade, Cocoa Crush, has one of my favorite lid shades of all time. The formula isn't necessarily my very favorite, it's the shade though. Absolutely glorious. This is a beautiful sparkly inner corner shade, and here we have a super glam lid shade. Colourpop really hit it out of the park with this one, and happily they have kept it around. Okay, let's talk about another Colourpop palette that I actually surprised myself when I opened this and decided absolutely this needs to go in this video. So this is the Wild Nothing palette. This is another one that I instantly know how to do my eyeshadow when I reach for it. Either Vagabond or Come Together go in my crease, or if I want to wear Peach, Morningside goes in my crease. I have two pretty lid shades here that make it a little interesting. One's kind of, I don't know what you would call that, pinky peach, and this one's green. This is a beautiful inner corner. Then these two Super Shocks are beautiful sparkly top coats, and we have depth And we have a nice plain cream shadow up here. Is it plain or does it have actual sequins in it? You know what? Actually, that one's a sequin shadow, I think. Or did it just get glitter in it from the ones next to it? No, I think it's a sequin shadow. So it has a little bit of glitters in it, but often those blend away. And part of the reason this palette is so easy to use is just because it doesn't actually go that deep. Even though there is depth down here, this palette does not go super deep. And so I know that I'm not going to go smokier than I want. Sometimes, or most of the time, I want a very kind of watercolor-esque, not super defined eyeshadow look that doesn't go too glam or too deep. And I know that even accidentally, I can't do that with this palette. So for me, that's one of the reasons why this is definitely in the easy peasy category. Here's one from Too Faced. So this is the Natural Nudes. This one is easy to use because of the way they've laid it out. They've essentially paired a matte with a lid shade. And if you want to stick to just mattes, you have a nice cream shadow over here and then a range actually of neutral and more pinky tones, and then this one's over here down here is quite warm. And if you're in one of those moods where you literally just want something in your crease and something on your lid and keeping it matte, this one through the crease, this one on the lid, you're done and you look glamorous. And if you want to bring up the glam a bit more, I think the shades in this are actually very glam because they're super sparkly. Right now, the sparkly top coat shades are really in, but this came out a couple years before they really hit the mainstream market. And these are definitely more sparkly than, oh, here I am. I said I wasn't gonna do this, but here I am. And these shades are definitely more piecey, sparkly than true metallics. I think the mattes in here are easy to work with. It has some nice depth over here if you wanna go deep. And all in all, just a pleasant palette to work with. Okay, so now I haven't mentioned a couple palettes from Sydney Grace. I have a lot of Sydney Grace palettes and I have a lot of Sydney Grace singles. They are one of my favorite brands, but I definitely have favorites in terms of not having to think about my eyeshadow when I reach for it. So the first one to mention is the Love's Journey palette. I just love the way this is laid out. You basically have 3 eye looks laid out in each row. And I think out of all of the Sydney Grace eyeshadow palettes I've tried, this one has my favorite matte formula. I don't know what they did different in this one, but they are extra nice in this palette. And they have their classic molten shimmer formula in here. Absolutely beautiful. If I had to keep just a few palettes, this would be one I would keep. That is really hard for me to say because I love so many palettes, but this would be one of them. Okay, second Sydney Grace palette that is easy peasy to use is the Unveiled palette. So this is their newest palette. It's a collaboration with Kendra Matthews, who's a bridal makeup artist. And she designed this palette to be a true bridal palette to have, again, 3 different looks that she gets asked for all the time. So we have the pinky look, the neutral brown look, and the cool toned look. And the reason why I would say this one is an easy one to reach for when you don't know what to do is because of this really nice matte white down here. It makes it great for a simple matte look. And then you have a lot of mattes to choose exactly which direction your eyeshadow look is going to go. But honestly, just these 2 would create a beautiful look for work. And if you want to add a little sparkle, holy smokes, this shade up here, not the usual Sydney Grace shade. This is a true sparkle shade and it will add a lot of sparkle. Okay, moving on to another brand that I think is so underrated and is so lovely. That would be Lorac. So I have 2 palettes from them right now, or I have more actually, but the other ones that I have are not still available. This is the Noir, this is the Fairytale Forest. I don't know why I said it like that. Fairytale Forest. Let's talk about the Noir first. Don't mind this poor damaged shadow. I managed to stick my finger in it the other day. So the way that Lorac laid this out is so nice. We have all the mattes on top and then all your shimmers and sparkles. I love when brands do that. I don't like to have to go through the palette and try and compare which matte do I want to use. I like having all the mattes together so I can look at all the shades next to each other. Because when they're next to each other, that's when you can see more of the undertone. You can see which ones are cool and which ones are warm. At least it helps me. So this is another palette that has a cream shadow to make a nice matte eye look if you want. We've got lots of depth over on this side of the palette. And this palette has a lot of those beautiful, sparkly, wet looking top coats that so many people are into, of course, myself included. But it also has a few more of their classic shimmer shades that are really smoothing on the lid and just a really nice formula. Even though there are sparkly shades in here and beautiful metallic shades, this is going to be one of those palettes that it's not going to look like you're wearing too much. I mean, there are occasions, right, where we don't want to wear too much. This is a good option for that. So that was the Noir. Fairytale Forest has the same deal where we have the mattes along the top. This one has a few different shades in it. We've actually got a green and a pink, or two greens, I should say, and a pink. But this one is the same where it has a variety of sparkly top coats and their regular shimmer formula. I just absolutely love the tones on this. They're a little more muted, a little more desaturated, and I just love that. This one doesn't have a ton of depth in it. We've only got this one over here that brings it deep, and this shimmer as well. But you know, for me, that's okay, but I could definitely recognize how someone would want a deeper shade than that. Next palette is a very nice affordable palette from Beauty Bay. This is the Neutral 16 pan palette. Oh my goodness, this actually has to be one of the top ones I reach for when I know that I want some beautiful, creamy, neutral mattes. Look at that top row. Look at the beautiful tones there. They're truly neutral. They're not super cool or super warm. We've got some nice depth here on the bottom. And again, we have a variety of sparkly top coats versus just like a regular metallic shimmer. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I have been very impressed by the matte formula. Yes, the shimmers are pretty, but I think it's the mattes that really are the standout formula in this palette. So easy to work with, nice and buildable, but not lacking pigment. If you are looking for some nice eyeshadows, but more on a budget, this may be a good option. And they have a version of this that's in a big palette and a little 9 pan as well. Okay, so the 15th palette is actually the palette I'm wearing on my lids today. This one is kind of an extra, a bonus, just because I'm still testing this one. So this is from Natasha Denona. I finally picked this up. I had people telling me, you need to get that palette. It's absolutely up your alley. And you were right. It is up my alley. So like I said, I'm still in the middle of testing this, but holy smokes, yes, this absolutely falls into this category. I'm tempted to rearrange it to how I like the Lorac ones, where all the mattes are together and then all the shimmers are together. I feel like that would make this even more user-friendly for me personally. But this palette has all the marks I look for of having easy to throw together eye looks, whether matte or shimmery. We've got a cream, we've got a dark brown. Using just these 3 shades right here, you could create a really nice matte look. And it has the beautiful sparkly shades. I'm wearing one of them today on my lid. I love how it looks. That's the shade Sheen, but it also has some beautiful true metallics in it as well. That's the shade Filigree. Filigree. Beautiful. I don't think I need to say much about this palette. I feel like everyone at this point has reviewed this palette, and of course, as you can imagine, I'm a fan. But I will have more to say about this when I review it at the end of the month. All right, there we have it. 15 easy palettes to create eyeshadow looks when you don't have any creative juices left. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. You get to hear about my tea of the day. I'm drinking this tea from Ahmad Tea, and I never know how to pronounce this word. I even Googled it before I sat down to film, and now I can't remember what it was. Is it something like Salon? Salon. I'm very sorry. Anyway, this is a very pleasant black tea. I'm drinking it plain, no milk, no lemon or sugar, anything. This tea would actually react well to all of those things. This would actually be a good one to put lemon in. It's nice and smooth, and it's not bitter. Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, I should probably mention my hair. So I know you're not used to seeing me in curls. I'm trying out the heatless curl, one of those where you put your hair in like a little twisty do at night. I think this one was called Robe Curls, and obviously it worked. I'm very, very happy with it. We'll see how long it lasts, and I definitely want to try it out and try and get more beachy waves. These turned out pretty nice and just super lovely. Anyway, I knew I was going to get a question about that. Thank you for watching. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you next time. Bye!